Alright, children, now gather round. Papa is going to read you a story, a Christmas story from the old country. It is called How Zelensky Stole Christmas. All the Slavs in East Ukraine liked Christmas a lot, but Zelensky, who lived in West Ukraine, did not. Zelensky hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why, no one quite knows the reason. It could be his brain wasn't set in just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the reason that fits him the best may have been that his paychecks came from the West. But whatever the reason, his shoes or his brain, he sat in his cozy bunker, hating the Slavs of Ukraine. Why aren't they more liberal? He snarled with a sneer. The Russians are winning, they're practically here. There he growled and he groaned and started nervously humming. We must find a way to get more Western funding. If we don't win this war, if we fall to the east, the Slavs of Ukraine will enjoy Orthodox feast, and they'll celebrate Easter, and they'll celebrate Christ, and my paycheck will begin to look not very nice. All the bombs and the tanks are running out now. I must keep the Russians from winning. But how?
So in Ukraine, Zelensky is proposing to move the celebration of Christmas to December 25th instead of January 7th, which is the traditional Orthodox celebration day.
Three Kings Day.
Yes, it's not even Christmas in the way that it's celebrated in the West. It's Three Kings Day. He's doing this, and I quote, to reject the Russian heritage of Ukraine. And there's a lot of things wrong with this, just on surface level. But I think more than any of the specifics of this actually, what this implies for Ukrainians, I think the wider implication of it is a lot more important in that this proves what people have been saying, what more critical people have been saying in regards to the conflict in Ukraine, that this isn't a conflict between Russia as its own political body and Ukraine as its own political body. It's a conflict between Russia and the West. And more broadly, it's a conflict between the East and the West that's got a front line in Ukraine.
It's a cultural war in a way, as it is a territorial war.
Yes, it's a conflict over what is Ukraine? What is Ukraine a vassal state for Western Europe, or is it a part of Russia?
Well, and that idea, I mean, there's many other nations that I wouldn't particularly call Russian vassal states that celebrate Three Kings Day. I mean, I grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, and we celebrated Three Kings Day because I mean that's a Greek thing. I mean, that was the Orthodox Church. It was the Roman Catholic Church that changed the dates.
That's what I mean.
I still celebrate Greek Easter. We celebrate Easter 2 weeks later than Catholics celebrate Easter.
And that's what I mean. This whole thing. It has nothing to do with this is a more authentic expression of Ukrainian culture, not corrupted by Russian influences. No, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church has always celebrated Christmas on January 7th.
The Greek Orthodox Church, the Turkish Orthodox Church, the Egyptian Orthodox Church.
Orthodoxy has been consistent in this throughout the entirety of its history.
So what you're doing is actually you're saying that you're not Ukrainian anymore.
Yes, you're directly countering your actual heritage in favor of embracing a position as a part of the West. You're no longer Ukrainian anymore at this point. You are, again, this isn't specifically this instant, but this is a example of a wider trend that this is an effort to take the East out of Ukraine, to take the Eastern heritage of Ukraine away from it and make it into Western Europe.
Which they've been trying to do for a while.
Yes.
And he's also making a lot of money to do this.
Absolutely. And it's not even popular. It's come under the move to move this holiday has come under fire by Ukrainians themselves. There's no connection between the actions of the Ukrainian government in this instance and the actual will of the Ukrainian people. Because, and we've established this before, we've talked about this before, Ukraine has been a part of Russia. They've always existed in the same block. The position of power exertion has shifted. You know, sometimes the capital's in Kiev, sometimes it was in St. Petersburg, sometimes in Moscow, but it's always been the same thing. It's only now that we see this line being drawn between, you know, the Russian half and the Eastern or the Western European half, and it's anti-traditional. It's a sign of the encroachment of the liberal attack on
kind of what Putin's been talking about.
Yes, you know, and it goes to further his argument against this whole move. You're actually, rather than defending the sovereignty of Ukraine, you're having them make compromises on their sovereignty in order to define themselves as not being Russia.
And correct me if I'm wrong, did Zelensky like push the Orthodox Church out of Ukraine? Did I read that? Or that he was like persecuting Orthodox priests, Ukrainian Orthodox priests?
Let's do some research because I've read that too.
So I'm seeing here that they're taking punitive actions against the Orthodox Church, and Volodymyr Zelensky calls it, he's trying to achieve Ukrainian spiritual independence.
Yes, I'm seeing this too. He basically accused the Ukrainian Orthodox Church as being under the jurisdiction of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Which, in a way, that's like, I mean, there's the Roman Catholic Church is kind of over the American. I mean, the Russian Orthodox Church is the largest Orthodox Church in the world. It's also the largest Orthodox country in the world.
Yeah.
Not that it has direct control over the, and honestly, that's a misunderstanding of how the Orthodox Church functions. That's one of the main differences between the Roman Catholic and the Orthodox Church.
That's what I was going to say, is that it comes from Westerners imposing their understanding of Catholicism onto Orthodoxy.
Because, I mean, the Pope is the universal ecclesiastical, like, head of the Roman Church. The whole disagreement they have with the Orthodox Church is that the Orthodox Church says that every individual church itself is sovereign, and together they make the church, and it's almost more sort of this, like, federal kind of idea, you know?
Yeah.
That's another example, I would say, of him trying to take away these classically Ukrainian values. I mean, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is also a very strong Orthodox Church and has been an Orthodox country for its entirety, just about.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, this is a war not between Ukraine and Russia, but between Western Europe and Russia and the East more broadly. I wouldn't be surprised if this trend continues. Like we said, that article that we're reading regarding the suppression of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church came out earlier this year, and now we're seeing the shift from the traditional Orthodox celebration of Christmas to the Western date, the Western celebration of Christmas. It's not that far out of the table to see, you know, a conversion to Catholicism, or at the very least, or I mean, I would prefer the conversion.
Like sort of an Anglican type of thing, like a Ukrainian church.
An adoption, or just a general adoption of the liberalism of the West, wherein all of these traditional institutions lose their authority and lose their power and lose their cultural legitimacy.
And if you think about it from a more of a political actor point of view, it could be similar to what Stalin did to the Orthodox Church in Soviet Russia. I mean, I'm sure the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is not as happy about these Western ideals coming in as Zelensky is, you know?
Exactly.
Because, I mean, the Orthodox Church, coming from the Orthodox, I'm a member of the Orthodox Church, is very traditional and loves Putin. They do. I mean, because Putin protects the church. He's a member of the Orthodox Church. They protect these values. They're very classical, traditional people. And, like, this encroaching Western ideology, which it's not even that everyone in the West believes it, but this global Western ideology that is spreading across the world, I can't imagine any Orthodox leader appreciating it very much.
So what you're saying is, in a way similar to what happened in the Soviet Union with
he sees them as a political threat.
Yeah, the Bolsheviks suppressing the Orthodox Church, and that being a constant slight against the Russian people, a constant reason to distrust the Soviet government.
Yes.
I think
because they feared, I think, that the power that it has because of it. Because, I mean, that's how deep these values go.
Yeah.
In those countries. And I think that I could see Zelensky seeing that as an opposition, because I mean, people, if they have to choose between a corrupt government and the church in these religious nations like that, a lot of times they will choose the church.
Yeah, and if I have to choose between God and Zelensky, it's not a very hard decision.
So if you kick God out of your country,
you're gonna have to, like, we're already seeing that this war is increasingly unpopular, even with Ukrainians. Like, there's no real fervor on the behalf of the Ukrainian people to continue this conflict. Most Ukrainian people, I would imagine, want to see this conflict come to an end, and I think they're beyond even it coming to an end with the Ukrainian government in the favorable position. I think they just want it to stop. The only fervor, the only real, like, jingoism, fuck yeah, we're killing tons of Russians, is coming from the United States State Department and the Ukrainian State Department.
yes.
And this is another step towards just pushing this. I think it's a terrible thing that happened, but I think it's probably a good signal for the trajectory of the war, because I can't imagine a state that's going against these traditional values so openly. And we've seen other things happen, like some military aid given to Ukraine was predicated on the legalization of gay marriage and stuff like that. We've seen the encroachment of liberalism.
War.
Stuff that Orthodox people, especially Eastern Orthodox people, like, the Orthodox people of the East, of Eastern Europe, the thing, like, they're adamant in their distrust, at the very least distrust of this, if not open rejection of these liberalizing tendencies. And this is another step towards that direction, towards the total engulfment of any actual Ukrainian heritage, any actual Ukrainian national spirit into the dissolving vat of acid that is Western liberalism.
And that's why you see countries like that are so connected. Even in Greece, which I know personally about. I mean, when you talk to people, yes, I will say, Greek people are some of the most racist people in the world. That's just a thing they've always done. But they view Egyptians and Greeks and Ukrainians and like Russians and Turkish people. They view them as like all the same thing, because they all have the same faith. So until he gets rid of the church and of those old Orthodox values, like the Orthodox calendar, they will always be connected. They're celebrating on the same days. They're celebrating the same things. They're speaking the same language. They're reading the same texts.
They have a formal connection through the body of the church.
And as long as that's there, I mean, you could win the war as Ukraine, and they're still connected to Russia. And that's why I don't think that what Putin is doing is necessarily horrible. The war itself is, and the bloodshed is, but if he's trying to provide a better government for them, and if that's what the Ukrainian people want, if the Ukrainian people didn't want that, and I truly believe they didn't, it would be different. But I think that most of them would rather a Russian government, which they basically have had. Most of them probably remember it for most of their lives, that they're older Ukrainians. I support that, and the only way for him to win this is going to be to just destroy Ukrainian identity.
Exactly. We've talked about that before. And to add on to what you're saying, I think that if it comes down to the decision that's being placed in front of especially older, more traditionally minded Ukrainians, is a Ukraine that is still Ukraine under a Russian government, or a Ukraine that is no longer Ukraine under a westernized government.
Because either way, somebody's going to be in charge that's not Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, not in charge, but overseeing. They're going to join the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc.
And it's part of this whole tendency away from the idea of the kind of like early modern idea of a nation state, and that's not really how political bodies exist anymore. We don't have these clearly defined lines in terms of, well, this is this country and this is this country, and totally separate spheres. I mean, you look at Western Europe, it's not a question of Ukrainian independence or Ukrainian subjugation to Russia. It's a question of Ukrainian subjugation to the European Union and NATO, or Ukrainian subjugation to Russia, because Ukraine is simply not big enough to be its own center. It's not big enough. It doesn't have enough substance to be its own dominant force.
Like Portugal or Denmark or even France and Italy, like any of them alone, they're not a power in the world. They join because they're the same thing essentially. They speak almost the same languages. Ukrainian and Russian are so similar in languages, and most of them speak both because they've had to for so long. And for us to try to encroach in that, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same argument with the Middle East, you know?
Yeah.
It's not going to work. You can't. They're going to be. You have to literally destroy their entire value system and everything they stand for as Ukrainians for this to work. And is that what we're fighting for as America now? Is like destroying other people's cultures and establishing our own?
Well, given the history of American global dominance for the past 20 years, I think that is probably what we're fighting for. But
and it hasn't worked, and it never works.
You see, there are a lot of parallels to draw between the Israeli-Palestinian situation too, where it's like for Israel to really establish Israeli security means that the Palestinians have to be destroyed, and to destroy the Palestinians would basically mean to formally wage war on the entirety of the Middle East, because Israel is a state that is operating outside of its jurisdiction.
It's in the Islamic sphere of influence.
Yes, it is in a wider civilizational body whilst representing another civilization. And Ukraine, the lines are a little bit more blurry there. I think there is an argument for almost cutting Ukraine down the middle. There's literally a river that runs through it that you could, eastern Ukraine and western Ukraine. But it's still in this Russian sphere. And this is the war in Ukraine isn't a war between two independent powers fighting each other, and it's not a war between Russia bullying a tiny country. It's not a heroic struggle of the Ukrainian people for independence. It is a war between NATO and the EU and Russia and the newly emerging Eastern Bloc.
And the Ukrainian people are suffering because of it.
Yes,
we're playing out our proxy war of these two massive spheres of influence. And I mean, this is kind of. I mean, you could have probably guessed this long ago. I mean, just where Ukraine is positioned. I mean, I mean, if we didn't know already, something was going to happen there. You know.
You know what Ukraine means?
What?
Ukraine means borderland.
I mean,
so there. I mean, it's kind of been the. I mean, you think about World War II. That Ukraine and Ukraine was really the intermediary point. Ukraine and Poland were the middle point where these two opposing ideas for Europe collided.
And I feel like Poland has kind of been lost to that like Western influence as well.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's the whole thing is just sad, Like there's too much money involved. We've seen this game play out, and no one wins. Literally, no one wins. We don't even win if we win the war. I mean, we saw that with Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran.
It just creates more problems for us in the future.
Just bloodshed.
That's what happened in Iraq. We, for all intents and purposes, we won in Iraq. We killed Saddam Hussein. We destroyed the Iraqi government. We destroyed the entire country. And then what did it gain us in the end? Now we're fighting ISIS in Iraq. Now we've destabilized this region. So basically, we're just constantly, in order to hold on to anything we have here, we're constantly at war with these disparate tribal groups.
It's like that quote from Mao that you say all the time. I mean, you could kill everyone in China. It would still be China.
Yeah, exactly.
You could kill everyone in Ukraine and try to make it a Western nation, but it's going to be...
Eventually, it's going to come back around to what it actually is.
Same with, if you take out the Iraqi government, it's going to be the Iraqi government in the future.
Exactly.
It's going to be what those people want, and based on like what they go through there and their culture and their heritage, and not even just the land itself. Mm-hmm. It formed. It's like we've said it before about Ted Kaczynski. It's like we can revert back to primitive times, but we're going to get right back here. Something made the Iranian people and the Iraqi people the way they are, and it's because
still
of that
there.
place that they're at,
and still present.
The Russian people are Russian because of where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like if you take those Russian people, I mean, if you put them in America for 2 generations, they'll be American people, Like that's how it works.
I feel like there is an eternal Ukraine, but it's a question of what body, what larger entity this kind of eternal Ukraine.
There's an eternal Texas.
Exactly. There's something about Texas that makes Texas the way Texas is. You look at the Ukrainian flag. I actually love the Ukrainian flag. It's the yellow and blue because it's the yellow of the wheat fields and then the blue of the sky. It's a beautiful flag.
It is.
There's something about it that is inherently Ukrainian.
And it is different than Russian, but it's still in that.
It's the same thing that Texas is to America. They're their own people. Sometimes they get a little bit uppity.
Hey, if you've ever been to Texas, you know that those are they're different people.
Yeah.
But to say for them to just not be American, or for another country to come in and say we're going to free them from, they're just, Texas can't stand alone.
Exactly. It's inherently going to be connected. You talked about that in the last episode we did, where it's like you've still got this highway infrastructure, this wider industrial infrastructure and agricultural infrastructure, these supply lines that are inherently always going to be connected to Russia because they were built under the Russian sphere of influence.
They're connected infrastructurally, they're connected religiously, they're connected by blood, quite literally.
Language.
Their food is the same, like they look the same. They're connected in every way possible, and I know Zelensky is probably trying to destroy these connections in any way he can, but you
can't.
You can't.